Hello, this is a quick revision video on the limiting factors of photosynthesis. This content comes up in Unit B4. Let's first talk about what the word limiting factor means. The limiting factor is the factor that is stopping the reaction from happening at a faster rate. In this case, we're talking about photosynthesis, so it's the factor that is stopping the rate of photosynthesis from increasing. Notice that it's not stopping it. The reaction doesn't stop, it just cannot go any higher, a higher rate. An example that I like to use for this is if I was baking brownies and I had loads and loads and loads of ingredients and I had loads of baking trays or pans to prepare the brownies and get them in, but I only had one oven, there's going to be a maximum number of brownies that I can make per hour. Because it doesn't matter how many ingredients I have, it doesn't matter how many trays I have. If I only have one oven, that's going to set a limit at how many brownies I can get an hour. And it's the same thing here. For photosynthesis, there's different limiting factors, and they set a limit at how high the rate can be. The limiting factors for photosynthesis include light intensity. Don't say amount of light, don't just say light, it's the light intensity. Carbon dioxide concentration. Again, don't just say carbon dioxide, don't say amount of carbon dioxide, it's the carbon dioxide concentration. Chlorophyll concentration. Another way of thinking about that is number of chloroplasts. So different plants will have different numbers of chloroplasts or concentrations of chlorophyll within the chloroplasts. Temperature. And people often want to add water, but that is a mistake. Do not put that. Okay? The word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water makes glucose plus oxygen. So you would think that water is going to be a limiting factor for photosynthesis, but the reality is that plants need water for so many different things that if it got to the point where water was a limiting factor for photosynthesis, the plant would already be in so much trouble it wouldn't be doing photosynthesis. It would be dying or dead already. So do not put water as one of the limiting factors for photosynthesis. We're going to draw a few graphs, just sketch them out, no numbers, to show what happens as we increase one of the factors. We'll start with light intensity, so we'll sketch our first graph here. On the y-axis, we will have rate of photosynthesis. And on the x-axis, we will have light intensity. The graph is going to look something like this. And what we can see here is that as we increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis is going up. So light intensity is going up, rate of photosynthesis is going up, and then it plateaus, it levels off. And the reason that that happens is another limiting factor is affecting the rate. This could be temperature, it could be carbon dioxide concentration, but it doesn't matter how much more we increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis is not increasing. Really important to point out that the rate of photosynthesis has not stopped here. It's still up here, it's still quite high. If the rate of photosynthesis had stopped, it would be back down at the x-axis. It's just that no matter how much more light is provided to the plant, the rate's not going to increase because there's another limiting factor at play. The chlorophyll concentration graph and the carbon dioxide concentration graph are going to look very similar to the light intensity graph. They will look like this. So for chlorophyll concentration, same thing as before. It's increasing. As the chlorophyll concentration increases, the rate increases, but then it plateaus because there's another limiting factor that's stopping the reaction from going at a faster rate, or a higher rate, I should say. Carbon dioxide concentration, same thing. As the carbon dioxide concentration increases, so does the rate until it plateaus because another limiting factor is not allowing the reaction to go at a higher rate. So those are our light intensity, carbon dioxide, and chlorophyll concentration graphs looking at their effect on the rate of photosynthesis. The last one is temperature, and the temperature graph is different than the others. We'll draw it out here. We have temperature on the x-axis and rate of photosynthesis on the y-axis. And your temperature graph is going to look like this. So it goes up as before, but then it drops back down. And where the others didn't drop back down to 0, they just stayed on a plateau, on a steady rate. Here we're actually going to drop the rate all the way down to 0. So what's going on here? Some of you may have noticed that this graph, a temperature graph, looks similar to the effect of temperature on enzymes back in Unit B2, and that's exactly what's going on here. It has to do with enzymes. We'll start on the left-hand side of the graph. The reason that as we increase the temperature, that the rate also increases is because when we increase the temperature, the particles, the reactants specifically, are given more kinetic energy. So they're moving around faster, which means that when they collide in a reaction, there is going to be a higher rate of successful collisions. When you have a successful collision, you have the reaction. So here your carbon dioxide and your water are colliding with an enzyme, and then that's catalyzing the reaction to make glucose and oxygen. This comes up in Unit C6 when we talk about rate of reaction. So a little bit of chemistry coming into our biology here. On the right-hand side, however, the reason that it is dropping off is because those enzymes we talked about that are involved in catalyzing photosynthesis, so they're important in photosynthesis actually working, will denature. Key word from Unit B2 when we did enzymes. Learn about B2 mostly in the context of digestive enzymes, but enzymes are going to be involved in all the reactions in living things, or almost all the reactions. What do we mean by denatured? We mean that the active site of the enzyme has changed shape. The bonds holding the protein together are starting to break or falling apart, so the enzyme's three-dimensional shape, specifically its active site, are starting to change shape, which means that the substrates no longer fit. Since the enzyme is catalyzing the reaction, if the enzyme's not working anymore, the rate of reaction is going to drop all the way down, possibly to 0. For those of you doing the higher paper for combined science and for separate biology, you need to go a little bit further in terms of the graphs of limiting factors of photosynthesis. Here we have a graph that has 3 different limiting factors on it. So it is a light intensity rate of photosynthesis graph, but then we've also incorporated temperature and carbon dioxide concentration, which here we're just displaying as a percentage. Let's ignore the blue line at the top for a second. We can see that at 15 degrees and 0.05% CO2, I'm maximizing my rate of photosynthesis out at about here. If I keep the carbon dioxide concentration the same, but I increase the temperature, now my maximum rate of photosynthesis is even higher. If I keep that temperature the same and increase the carbon dioxide concentration from 0.05 to 0.5, then I'm going to get an even higher rate of photosynthesis. So what you need to do for the higher paper is to be able to look at a graph like this and explain what's going on. So the difference between these two at the bottom, the green and the red, I'm keeping the carbon dioxide concentration the same. I'm increasing the temperature, and we can see the effect that that has on the maximum rate of photosynthesis. For the top two, I'm keeping the temperature the same, but I'm changing the carbon dioxide concentration. The last bit that can come up on the higher paper is this idea of how to maximize the rate of photosynthesis in the most efficient way possible in a greenhouse. If you had a greenhouse and you were going to sell your plants, then you would want to maximize the rate of photosynthesis, because the more photosynthesis there is, the higher the rate, the more growth you'll get, which in theory means the more profits you'll make. But we need to remember that to maximize that rate of photosynthesis, I need to control temperature, carbon dioxide concentration, and light intensity. All of which are going to cost money. So if you have the heating on, that's going to cost you money. If you have the lights on all the time, that's going to cost you money. More high intensity or higher intensity light bulbs is going to cost more than lower intensity ones, etc., etc., etc. So the idea here is, how can you maximize this without wasting money? And you want to pay attention to your limiting factors. If we look at, for example, on the graph above, the green line here, if I were to leave the temperature of the greenhouse at 15 degrees Celsius and had a concentration of 0.05% carbon dioxide, if I had my lights on at this intensity, I would get this rate of photosynthesis. If I had them on at this intensity, I would get this rate of photosynthesis. If I had it on at this intensity, I would have it at this photosynthesis. This last one here is going to cost a lot more money than this one here, but I'm not having any change in the rate of photosynthesis. So trying to increase the light intensity in the greenhouse while ignoring the other limiting factors is just going to end up wasting money, and you're not going to make as much profit. So anytime you get a question about farming or the greenhouse efficiency, what you're trying to figure out is, how can I get the highest rate of photosynthesis for the least amount of money? And another way of thinking about that is, if I have a situation like the one here, where I'm only increasing one of the limiting factors and not the others, then I'm just wasting money, because it doesn't matter how much I increase the light intensity once I've reached maximum photosynthesis for that temperature and carbon dioxide concentration. I'm not going to get a higher rate of photosynthesis, which means I'm not going to get bigger plants, which means I'm not going to get bigger profits, and I've just wasted the money increasing the light intensity. Okay, I hope this has been helpful for you. Talk to you soon.